In this video, I'm going to explain the information on pages 137 to 144 of your book. So we're going to start by talking about some different types of bone cells and what they do. You have osteoblasts. These are the cells that build bone tissue. And I always remember this because I think of blast and build. They both start with the B. Then you have osteocytes. This is a mature bone cell. And every osteocyte used to be an osteoblast. So it's an osteoblast when it's young and it's building tissue, then it matures into an osteocyte. And we're going to be writing the names of these cells a lot, so I'm going to abbreviate them. So OB is for osteoblast. Then we have a third cell called an osteoclast. This one dissolves old bone tissue. And I abbreviate this one OC. So we're going to talk a lot about osteoblast and osteoclast. And I'm just going to start writing OB and OC for them. So let's look at those cells in the context of the bone. So here we're looking at a cross section of a bone. So you can see here is the bone and it's been cut through, and then we're zooming in on this little section here and looking up close. So this is an up close view of the inside of a bone. Notice that the bone has all these what are called central canals. A central canal is a tunnel through the bone that contains blood vessels and nerves. So in this picture, the red is an artery, the blue is a vein, the yellow is a nerve. Right? And there's several of them in your bone. So bones are full of blood vessels and nerves in these tunnels. Then we have out here the outer membrane, the periosteum. This is a covering on the outside of the bone. This is where osteoblasts are made by mitosis. So this is where new bone cells come from. So here in the periosteum, you have mitosis, cell division, makes new osteoblasts. So those new osteoblasts, once they're made, they migrate to a central canal. So the osteoblasts are going to be made out here in the periosteum, and they're going to migrate to a central canal. And remember, their job is to build new bone tissue. So the osteoblasts, once they get to the central canal, they're going to access the blood, and they're going to get nutrients from the blood, especially calcium, because there's a lot of calcium in your bones, and they're going to use that to make new bone tissue. And remember previously we talked about you are what you eat and how that literally is true. So here's where the osteoblasts are going to take nutrients from your blood and use them to build your bones. And they take lots of nutrients, but calcium's the one we're going to focus on. And another word for bone tissue is matrix. We can call it bone matrix. So in our picture, where you have these central canals, See these little kind of yellow dots? Those are your osteocytes. And right here around the central canal is where you have osteoblast making new bone tissue. Once they finish making that bone tissue, that's when they mature into an osteocyte. So when they are done making the tissue, or the matrix, they become an osteocyte. And they're now trapped in the matrix. So here you can see this, there we go, there's one of those cells circled. Each one of these is an osteocyte, and they're trapped in that bone matrix. This is a continual process. Your bones remodel. So your bones are always changing. You don't have the same bone tissue today as you had 5 years ago. It's always changing. So you have a constant process of new osteoblasts coming in and making that bone tissue. And then those cells mature into osteocytes and they form a ring here. Then another batch of new osteoblasts will come in, build some new tissue, and your osteocytes keep getting pushed outward. So you have all these generations of bone cells building bone tissue. And here you can kind of see this would be like generation 1, 2, 3, with 1 being the oldest generation in this picture and 3 being the youngest because it's closest to the central canal. These circles, these generations, are called lamellae. So here we have 3 lamellae. So the ones at the outer edge are the oldest, the ones closest to the central canal are the newest. Now, if this just kept going on and you never got rid of old tissue, your bones would be huge. They would just keep getting bigger your whole life. But that's not the case. They stay at a constant size. So that is because of the action of the osteoclast. So the osteocytes are trapped in that bone matrix. They get pushed outward with each new generation. And when they get out to the edge, then that's when the osteoclast will dissolve the old bone matrix. And when they do, they kill the osteocytes that are in there. So you're getting rid of the old tissue and the old cells and constantly replacing it with new. So out here at the edge where you have the old, that's where then the osteoclast would come along and dissolve that old. And then you would make another layer of new here and everybody would get pushed out, and that is a continual process. So that continual process is bone remodeling. So it is the continual process of the osteoblast building new matrix and the osteoclast dissolving the old matrix. Now let's think about this in context of the body. Let's put some implications to it. Every time your osteoblasts build, they take calcium from your blood. So this means that you decrease your blood calcium level. Also, your bones get stronger. The more bone matrix you have, the stronger your bones are. Every time the osteoclasts dissolve, they put that calcium back into your blood. So whenever they're dissolving your bones, the calcium that's in the bone tissue they dissolve is returned to the blood. So that increases your blood calcium level. But this makes your bones weaker because you're dissolving it. So the strength of your bones and the amount of calcium in your blood depends on the activity of these two cells. So on one side, it's like a tug of war. On one side, you have the osteoblasts that are working to increase bone strength and decrease blood calcium. On the other side, you have the osteoclasts that are doing the opposite. And what your blood calcium and bone strength end up being depends on the activity of these two cells, which one's working more than the other. So you have to have some control here. You can't just let these cells go wild. So your body has control mechanisms. Osteoblasts are controlled by how much you exercise. So everybody knows that lifting weights makes your muscles bigger and stronger, but what a lot of people don't realize is lifting weights also makes your bones thicker and stronger. Every time you exercise, that stimulates your osteoblasts to build more bone tissue. So the more you exercise, and especially weightlifting and jumping, because that puts stress on your bones, and your response to stress on your bones is making them stronger. So stress makes them stronger. Your osteoclasts are controlled by parathyroid hormone. And we can abbreviate parathyroid hormone, PTH. So you have in your neck your thyroid gland. A lot of people are already familiar with the thyroid gland. Embedded in the thyroid gland are the parathyroid glands. So you have parathyroid glands embedded in the thyroid gland. Functionally, they are independent of the thyroid gland. They have different jobs. They do totally different things. They just happen to be one inside the other. But don't mix them up. Like a lot of people already know that your thyroid gland controls your metabolism. Parathyroid's not involved in that. It is functionally independent. This gland monitors your blood calcium. And its job is to keep you at homeostasis. You need homeostasis of blood calcium. So it's very important you keep enough calcium in the blood. The reasons why you need to have calcium in your blood is for your heart to beat, for your neurons to work, for your muscles to contract, and in order to form blood clots. These four things depend on having the homeostasis level of calcium. So if you didn't have enough calcium in your blood, you could actually go into cardiac arrest. Your heart would stop beating. Your neurons wouldn't be able to send signals. Your muscles wouldn't be able to contract. And if you got a cut, you could bleed to death because you wouldn't be able to make a blood clot. So it's very important to keep the right amount of calcium in your blood. And that's the responsibility of your parathyroid glands. So if your blood calcium is low, then your parathyroid gland will secrete parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone will stimulate your osteoclast to dissolve more bone. And then by dissolving more bone, they put that calcium in your blood, and that way it's going to weaken your bones, but your body has to decide priorities, which is more important, keeping your heart beating or having strong bones. So if it means sacrificing your bones in order to keep your heart going, that's what your body's going to do. That's what your parathyroid gland will do for you, to keep you alive. So let's put this all together in the big picture. Remember, we said your bones are constantly changing, they're remodeling. You have osteoblasts that build new bone tissue. You have osteoclasts that get rid of old bone tissue. How much bone tissue you actually have is a balance between the activity of these two cells because they're doing the opposite of each other. The more you exercise, the more your osteoblasts work. Exercise stimulates osteoblasts to build more bone tissue, and that gives you strong bones. The less calcium you have, the more your osteoclasts are going to have to work. If your blood calcium gets low, your parathyroid gland will secrete parathyroid hormone and tell those osteoclasts to dissolve more bone in order to keep your blood calcium level high enough.